Hello, I'm Locke, Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines. Our guest is Eric Ponti. He is our state representative for District 69, and Eric's going to talk to us about the judicial process in the legislative house. He's also going to talk about the process in the Senate, how that works with the governor, but also he's going to talk about the extraordinarily historical new education law that just passed in the state of Louisiana that's being examined by the Wall Street Journal all over the nation. So join us on the next Legal Lines with State Representative Eric Ponti. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show today Eric Ponti. He's a Louisiana State Representative for District 69. Eric, good to see you again.
Good seeing you. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's give the folks kind of a quick background on you, just, where you're from and education, business, employment.
Baton Rouge, grew up here, went to Our Lady of Mercy in Calicut, and my degree is in construction management, and I own my own construction firm. General construction, residential, light commercial. Been doing it 18 years now.
And was elected, in 2007?
Correct, 2007, the term was 2008 to 2012. I was really active with the Home Builders Association on the local level and state president, and I was exposed to the legislative process.
Interesting process.
Absolutely.
Outside in on the inside. Huh?
Never imagined in my life I would ever be exposed to it, and was exposed to it, and we had term limits and a new governor. It was time for change, and was very up to date on the process, so that's why I ran.
And your term limit accrues when?
2020, excuse me.
Right. And you were, as I recall, unopposed on this most recent election.
That's correct. There were 4 the first time around in 2007, and this time I was unopposed.
So you kept your folks happy.
I did.
That's correct.
Represented the district well.
Let's dive into, because as I recall, the session just ended, last week? Or
Correct.
was it this week?
A week and a half ago.
Okay.
Yeah, Monday.
And y'all tackle one of the biggest issues, frankly, that's been facing our state in its history, and that is the education system, because it was absolutely failed. Louisiana was always the top at being the worst.
That's correct.
And something had to change, and it did. Tell the folks what happened.
Well, and the great part about that is we jumped in as soon as the session started, and we tackled the issues.
You could fight a long time.
It's fighting a long time for the whole session. As you know, bills have to clear both chambers and have a lot of committee meetings in the interim to clear as well. So we started early, tackled it hard with the voucher program, some rebate incentive issues to encourage investment into education from the private sector.
And let's describe the process in the context of how the legislature works, because you are chairman of, frankly, the most powerful committee that there is at the House. Tell the folks about that.
Well, I chair Commerce Committee, which is the business and industry committee in the legislative process. Anything to do with banking, railroads, construction, river piloting, any of those kind of utility efforts come towards the Commerce Committee. Anything having to do with business banking laws come to Commerce Committee. And it's a great position. It's my background. It's my knowledge with the construction industry, so I enjoy it. But it's very critical to the state.
And how were you chosen as chairman?
The Speaker, Chuck Leckley, gave me the honor of offering that position to me, and I was very appreciative to have it.
And on your committee, as I understand it, you actually created a subcommittee of some sort?
On our committee, basically, we have the subject matters that come beforehand. We don't technically have a subcommittee. We created, in 2008, subcommittees in the appropriations process to make sure the budget was fairly looked at and scrutinized more than it had ever been, and we've kept that in place currently as well. But we have 18 members that serve on Commerce from all over the state, representing all kind of different industries.
And what's its representation in terms of Republican versus Democratic?
The committee overall is pretty evenly split. A little bit more Republican than Democratic by party registration, but the philosophies on business are pretty much identical and in line. It was a very good committee. We were very successful in promoting things. It's a cooperation. We communicate quite well between each other, and things that enhance businesses, we were able to move out of the committee, and things that were going to hamper or stifle business, we did not clear the committee process.
And Lord knows every state in the nation needs business right now. And
absolutely.
We're top of the line. Let's talk about the other committee, Homeland Security.
That's great. That, in case of storm or any events, there's a subcommittee of Homeland Security that I'm a member that served on there. And fortunately, so far, We've been quiet with storms or any incidences.
Praise God for that.
Pray to God for that we've been very quiet, and hope it stays that way for the next 4 years.
Does it encompass the threat that we have from our southern border with potential folks coming across that want to do harm to Americans?
It affects everything having to do with the security of the industry, the population, the government, whether it is the Homeland Security with storms, disasters, and recovery efforts, terrorist attacks, or anything like that. That's kind of the oversight committee.
I remember speaking with the sheriff, Sid Gotro, that it's remarkable how many high target places we have in East Baton Rouge Parish. We have the port, we have the seat of government, we have the stadium for LSU, we have the refineries, we have St. Francisville with the nuclear reactor. It's just remarkable.
Oil storage facilities.
It's just,
and it's all right here in this one little area.
And we're one state away from our southern neighbor Mexico and some other actors that don't like us. So
that's correct.
I'm glad we got somebody up there that's kind of watching over things for us. As I understand it, we receive federal dollars via grants to help implement, I guess, policies that protect not only our state but also the nation.
Absolutely, from terrorist attacks to drug task force and everything of that nature. The Homeland Security Task Force gets a little bit of funding from all areas.
All right, so let's dive back into the system then. So you're on the committee, or the legislature has the House and it has the Senate,
That's
and
correct.
then you have the governor. And all three branches have to agree on a bill to become a law, an act, correct?
Well, correct. In the legislative branch, we'll have a committee. Let's take the educational bills. There's a committee just that deals with subject matter on education. The bills are heard there first. If the committee thinks that it's a good measure, then it's voted favorably and moved favorably out of committee.
Now, how are the committee members educated? I assume that's where we hear the evil term lobbyists and citizens and all that, but the bottom line is there's no way that a legislator can know everything about everything.
Absolutely not. And you look to individuals that have like-mindedness with the expertise in an area, like mine being construction, others in education, insurance, and you look for them. But the committee process is the one time the public has an opportunity to have input in the process and how they feel for or against a measure.
So we need to stress that. I mean,
Absolutely.
The bottom line is that the citizenry is not kept out of the loop, and they can participate. How do they do that?
They just show up. There is a list with a phenomenal website that lists which meetings are held on which day, which subjects will be heard, or what bill matter will be heard that day in that committee. And they just show up and they turn out cards. That's how I started. I showed up as a home builder, representing the home builders, licensing law or anything of that nature, and I testified on behalf of my industry as a citizen. And that's how the people become engaged in the process. And both House and Senate, they can testify.
And so the committee receives the input from the general population and anyone else who wants to try and educate the representatives. And then the committee members vote on it, and is it a majority prevails, then it moves forward to the full House floor?
That's correct. And it's an opportunity for an exchange. Not only do they give testimony on their position, but the members of the committee have the right to answer questions. So there's an open dialogue back and forth.
So there's education going both ways?
Absolutely. And then it opens up questions from other members that maybe not have thought of before. And everyone, it's on the web. You can sit at home, you can be in your office anywhere and watch committee hearings live and on the House floor live on the internet.
That's got to get kind of slow though, huh? Got teasing. Tell me, how is a bill written? I mean, you guys aren't all lawyers, so how does that happen? If y'all decide, okay, this is what we would like to happen, who prepares it? And who reads it? Who makes sure that what y'all want to be in there is in fact in there?
Well, on the House side, we have a unique system set in place. Every committee, as I am Commerce, has a staff, and that staff is dedicated strictly to writing laws as it relates to the Commerce section of the Constitution. Education the same way. So our legal advisors, our staff attorneys are versed very well in that subject matter. They draft the legislation. We bring the ideas, the concepts, and they are the ones that draft the legislation. On the Senate side, the Senate has staff personnel that works for each senator that drafts their legislation regardless of the subject matter. But we have a top-notch legislative staff that is very well versed in the subject matter and does a great job of crafting the legislation.
Excellent. And so once it's drafted, you have a vote on it, it prevails by majority, then it goes to the House floor, and then at that point the entire House debates the benefits, the pros and cons of the bill?
Every member, 105, gets an opportunity to ask questions, go to the mic, ask questions from their desk to participate in the process, and we can make amendments to change the bill. If you don't like the way it comes, you can do an amendment to change it.
Is there an allotted amount of time?
Absolutely not.
So if you want to talk for an hour
One
or 2
education
hours?
bill, we started at 9 in the morning and we finished 12:45 the next day in the middle of the night.
Wow. We'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke with Legal Lines. Eric Ponti, our state representative in Louisiana. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and again, we're very pleased to have on the show today Eric Ponti. He's the State Representative for District 69. Eric, again, thanks for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
Let's keep going with this process. So committee hears it, they vote on an issue, and then they send it, assuming a majority is in favor of it, they send it to the House floor where you indicated there's 104 members, House members? 105. And then kind of like a free-for-all. I'm sure it's organized, but anybody who wants to discuss it can do so.
That's correct.
How does that work?
Well, once the bill is pulled up on the House floor to be debated on the calendar, the author goes down, gives a little insight as to what the bill and the subject matter does.
And the author is the person who is kind of like the sponsor of the particular issue?
The author of the bill.
Okay.
Correct. There'll be a bill number associated by author's name. That member will go to the floor, give an overview of the bill, and then open it up for questions. And then it's fully debated at that point in time.
And there's no time limit, I think you indicated previously.
No, every now and then we'll implement a 5-minute rule that dialogue can only go, and you keep extending the time, but it kind of keeps things in a time perspective, let's say.
It was interesting in the context of the educational bill that not only did a bill have to come out of a committee regarding education, but a bill also, a companion bill, had to come out of the Appropriations Money Committee.
Well, absolutely. The education package bill that we're referring to had to deal with the subject matter, but it had funding. Millions and millions of dollars. So it had to be, as we say, dual referred, and it went to the Committee of Appropriations and heard there on the fiscal aspect of the measure.
Interesting. I wasn't contemplating the fact that there was literally a battle on two fronts, not only just the merits of the bill itself, but the cost.
Well, the dollars following the students and the cost and the MFP and everything associated with education. So there are bills that are in the process that are, as we say, are dual referred. So not only does it have to clear the first step of the education, but then it had to clear the appropriations process before it could move to the House floor. And then it was debated on the House floor. And in amendments, if members didn't like certain aspects or they thought things could be different, they could offer an amendment to change the legislation. And those are voted on individually as well. You do that in the committee process and on the House floor.
And all of this is based on a majority vote?
Absolutely.
Okay,
That's correct.
So an amendment to a bill that's sitting up there being contemplated requires a majority to be actually amended or amend the bill that's also being contemplated.
Or the amendment could fail. A lot of times there are amendments offered that do not get the majority present voting and does not
it's
pass.
not attached to the bill. It doesn't become part of that bill.
That's
the
correct.
language of the bill.
That's
okay.
correct. And then we hear it on the floor, and if the House floor is to choose to advance it to the Senate, it starts all over again. It goes to Senate Education, Senate Finance, and to the Senate floor.
And if at the House level, if I think we were talking before, if you have 50 votes but you need 53, the author can say, wait a minute, I'm going to pull this back. Explain that process.
Correct. If you have an instrument that comes to the floor and needs 53 and it falls a little short, let's say 50 votes to 40 votes, you've got more fors than against. The gentleman, as they say, can give notice to reconsider. So the bill is returned back to the calendar, and that author has the opportunity to bring that up at another point in time.
And the reason that would take place is because if it is voted on and it doesn't prevail, it doesn't get a majority vote, it's dead for the session?
Correct. If it was reversed, if you had 50 nays and 40 yays, then the bill's dead.
Okay.
It's gone.
All right. And so the bill passes at the House level. Does that bill then go to the Senate, or is the Senate at the same time contemplating the same issue and has its own bill moving?
There are dual instruments, but in this particular instance, you're following the same bill all the way through. The Senate does not act on it. It's given 3 readings. It's basically notice to the public each day you advance a bill to the 3rd reading and commit it to a committee. So it starts all over again. And the public, again, you may have testified on the House side. It's a whole different committee, a whole different mindset on those Senate committees, and vice versa, that the public can come back down and testify.
So the exact same process we described, but in the Senate, and is it a majority vote rule over there?
All the same rules of voting and the process on the Senate apply.
And so assuming that the Senate decides to pass it with a majority vote and the House passes it, because in this case it was the same language.
Right, it was the same instrument.
So there was a requirement that there be kind of a get together and let's figure out how we're going to tweak it because the House passed something different than the Senate, right?
That's correct.
But that does happen on occasions?
That's absolutely correct. And say that House instrument got to the Senate and there's some amendments that the House author of the bill did not necessarily agree with, we have to concur. Once the Senate makes changes or amendments when a bill comes back, we either concur or vote not to concur. And if that member doesn't like it, he can vote not to concur, which sends it to a conference committee, and there'll be 3 House members and 3 Senate members that meet in a committee to decide, the final outcome of the bill. And then once that's measured, we go back to both sides, and both chambers must concur, and then it goes to the governor for signature.
So we have 105 state reps, and what is it, 39 senators, but when all said and done, 3 from each house, 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate, ultimately try and reconcile it together.
Correct.
And if they don't, what happens?
Well, they come back to that. Well, the instrument would die.
So if that doesn't work, it's done.
It's done.
Wow, there's a lot of hurdles you got to jump.
There's a lot of hurdles, a lot of opportunities to address the instrument. Once they're concurred, and so the conference committee makes their report, they come to the House floor. And we saw that in some issues in the past, that they come back and they say, okay, we've reached an agreement, we concur. Well, you get enough members that say, no, we don't like what y'all did. You can still kill the instrument by not voting for it, not concurring. And if you never do reach a concurrence of both chambers, the instrument dies.
It's fascinating. Let's explain, you came in at the right time as far as being part of the majority, because as I recall, the House became majority Republican, which is your party affiliation.
That's correct.
When you came in, correct?
That's correct. We were close, and then there was several members changed in the chambers as the years advanced. Several members changed parties, and now we are a Republican majority.
Meaning Democrats said, you know what, not the same Democratic Party we used to be part of, or they saw the writing on the wall, and unless they joined the Republican Party, they weren't going to get a whole lot of say-so.
Absolutely. I don't know their additional mindset, but their beliefs, philosophies, or whatever changed and changed their party affiliation. We had a lot of that last session.
And then on the Senate side, I believe it became Republican controlled in the last, year or so?
Yeah, just recently.
And then we have with Governor Jindal a Republican governor, and therefore I guess it's more possible for significant change to occur. For example, what happened in education?
Well, the education, and there were some attempts to change the retirement. We still need to address that issue. That issue's not gone. It's going to come back. It needs to be addressed for the future of our state. If we don't address it, then we're going to have bigger issues.
And when you say retirement, you're talking about for teachers specifically, or
no,
you're talking about
state
pension?
Employees, pension. We've got several pension systems throughout the state, and the liability, the unaccrued liability that we have out into the future for our children, that's going to have to address at some point in time. We took a great bite at the apple. The testimony was heard. And we'll just keep trying instruments over the next few years to address that issue, because it is a major debt crisis to the state.
And that's really the next issue I wanted to discuss, and that is, the bottom line is money's the big deal.
Absolutely.
How much money in revenues do we have? How much do we need to spend? How much can we spend? And where do we cut? And as I understand it, y'all have reduced the number of state employees by over 10,000?
Correct, right? Almost 11,000 over the past 3 years. That is correct.
What else? What other changes have taken place because there's not the revenues that's needed based on the expenditures in the past?
Well, there's been a lot of streamlining efforts, like in the construction industry, a review of plans, of some sharing with the fire marshal and Department of Health and Hospitals, and some different consolidation efforts, combining departments and reducing overhead in that measure as well. And there are certain jobs that the government's done forever that's better realized, and a cost savings to let the private sector run those programs. That's been a big push, privatization. Not everybody agrees with it, but there is a savings out there.
And as I recall also, there was a redistricting plan that on the House side, you were the author of the bill that prevailed.
Correct. Last year, that was a congressional redistricting plan that I authored, that we went from 7 congressmen to 6.
And that's based on the census that was done of the population of the United States of America. And because Louisiana lost citizens, the number of representatives we had at the federal government level, but also how the state was chopped up into districts changed?
That's correct, and the representation of Congress.
All right, well, we'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke, Meredith, and Eric Ponti. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and again, we're pleased to have on the show today Eric Ponti. He is our state representative for District 69. Eric, let's dive back into it. We were talking about the money issue, and basically the state revenues have decreased, and of course we had at points in time, due to the hurricanes or because of the meltdown on the federal level, some big monies that were coming our way, but those have been pretty much spent as I understand it.
Correct. The influx of federal dollars after the Rita and Katrina are gone, and those programs have been ended.
And so we're faced with only being able to spend what we receive, and oftentimes that's I guess a bone of contention, because folks are describing some of the revenues as being one-time revenues or available one time for an expenditure. Explain that whole issue.
Well, we were caught with having to cut over $200 million this budget year due to shortfalls in income revenue.
And last year it was what, 500 million?
Well, in this current year, we had to, this coming year that starts next month, we had to address another 300 and something million, all in this session through budget cuts, streamlining, employee reductions, and things of that nature. One of the big issues is concerns of using one-time money for recurring expenses, and we addressed that and we reduced that number down significantly.
The other issue you mentioned on the last segment was that pensions are an issue. I guess it's because it's one of those dedicated expenditures or something?
Well, there's several systems in there are several retirement systems, and those debts, as the population ages and the financial burdens that those systems will feel as the population retires, there's not enough money to cover it.
And I guess
we've got to address that.
This is an issue that apparently pretty much every state in the
Absolutely.
union seems to be hitting head on. And I know there was the recent brouhaha in Wisconsin where Governor Scott Walker basically got recalled because they addressed the pension issue. Just was apparently reelected in the last week or so.
Correct.
And so that issue's been resolved there, but it sounds like it's going to be a lot of headbutting on this side. Huh?
It is. There's a lot of state employees. You know, we have a very large system to address the needs of the state, and we're reducing that, as we spoke about in the last segment, of 11,000, basically 11,000 state employees. We passed one measure that allows new hires only to be able to get into like a 401k cash balance system. But the current systems, the contribution levels and things of that nature, that gap has to be covered at some point in time. And over each session, we're going to have to continue to address that. And we can't keep kicking the can down the road. We have to tackle that issue. And it's going to be a hard issue. And as a business person, it's just something you have to do. You know, when you've only got so much money, there's nothing you can do. It's never pleasant. And I understand. I have a lot of state employees in my district, and we listen to all their concerns and needs, but it's a huge issue for the state.
Well, if there's only so much money you got to spend, something's got to happen.
Something's got to give at some point in time. That's correct.
Explain the whole redistricting event that occurred because of the census of the United States population.
Every 10 years it's required to do the census. We had a unique situation in Louisiana on two levels, one between Katrina and Rita, and the population shift throughout the state into other states.
Meaning primarily New Orleans folks having to either leave the state or moving north.
The growth that we experienced in Baton Rouge, especially Livingston and Ascension,
right.
Over on the other side of the state as well. They saw the population, and then other areas in the northeast corner of the state lost population. So you go in on the congressional level. Because of our population, the years back that they used, we lost some population, or stayed steady in the end. We lost a congressional seat. On the House and Senate side, because of the shift in population, there's got to be equal representation. So we had to redraw the lines to cover that. And it's also down to the school board and the PSC, and we had a special session just on redistricting.
So there was, on the federal government level, we lost a representative in the House.
That's correct.
And so there was a redrawing of the districts.
We had 7 congressmen, now we have 6.
Right. So we had 7 districts, we had to redraw them so that we had 6. And then on the state level, as it relates to government, the same event, where you had to redistrict?
Yes, the numbers of House members and Senate members stayed the same, but the boundaries and the lines of the districts had to shift due to the population shift. And we picked up a seat here in Baton Rouge. There was a lot of growth in South Baton Rouge that put a lot of dense population in the district, so we had to shift those lines because we had to be balanced around at the same population number. And
another issue or hurdle that had to be dealt with was the fact that the United States Justice Department has to sign off on how those districts were redrawn. Explain.
Yeah, that's called the pre-clearance process, to make sure there's representation throughout the state that's been around for years, and both plans, House and Senate and congressional plan, all pass the Justice Department.
And it's required because there was concern in the past about discrimination based on race and not giving minorities an adequate representation in government, and therefore the Justice Department looks at what Louisiana's legislative bodies with the governor did, and they look at it and they say, yeah, nobody's being discriminated against here. They have adequate representation, so they let it go.
That's correct. They call it minority-majority districts.
Okay.
And there's a fair representation there.
Explain the governor's role in the legislative process, because once the bill gets out of the House and the Senate okays it and everybody's behind it, it's still got one more hurdle to jump over. What's it got to do?
Well, the governor either signs it, or, as we've seen a lot in the past week or two, there are different measures that he vetoes for various reasons, and that's his authority, to veto measures that we pass.
And so, once again, just quick education, power is divided between the governor, one man,
right,
your House of Representatives, which is 105 folks, and the Senate, which is 39. But that one man, that shows you how much power the governor has. That one man can say, I don't care if all you guys down here have okayed it, I don't like it, and it's over with.
Absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of that right now at the end of this last session. I believe there's a dozen or so instruments that's been vetoed already.
Let's dive into the Louisiana Public Service Commission, because I know you're running for that position. Explain to the folks why you want to do that.
Well, it's District 2. It's a very large district.
I think you said almost 1 million people? 900,000?
It's 900,000 people from the Baton Rouge area to the Felicianas, down to Lafayette, Iberia, St. Martin, all the way down to Terrebonne, Lafourche. It's a very large district. There's only 5 public service commissioners. Jimmy Fields was our public service commissioner for years.
Years and years.
Did a great job.
Vice chairman, as I recall.
A great job. He's the representative as well. Great person, and we appreciate the service that he's done. He's retiring. Myself as commerce chair, as a small business person, is most important. I'm a small business person that operates in an industry that's government regulated. We have building codes, building inspectors, federal inspections, stormwater runoff. So I know what it's like to be a business person to operate with excess government regulations. Most importantly is consumers and the utility rates. That's our biggest expense next to our house note or rent is what we pay for utilities. And that's phone, cable, power, gas.
And so that's the responsibility of the commission.
That's the oversight of the PSC, that's correct. That's their oversight, and we need to keep those rates in line. We need to keep them low because that is a major burden for the citizens of the state. And as well, to balance that out, gas consumption in our industry, in our facilities to produce power to create jobs and generate jobs and grow our marketplace, it's also a factor there. So we need to protect our citizens and keep our utility rates low and then also allow jobs to be created too.
So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. One, you want to make sure there's not too much regulation because that can destroy business and then ultimately result in fewer jobs.
Absolutely.
And then on the business side, or not the business, but the amount that's allowed to be charged for the products, whether it's water, electricity, any kind of utilities, cable.
Household movers are regulated by the Public Service. All that goes into that. Motor transport, all that is underneath the regulations of the PSC.
And so you want to keep that low to help individual citizens, but also the businesses so that they can keep making a profit, keep people employed.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And you save money on the individual front, on the home front. You know, they have children and debts and other issues or whatever, and that's a big expense.
And that election takes place when?
November the 6th in the presidential election cycle.
And there are, I think you indicated 5 members.
There are 5 members represented all over the state.
And you are running as a Republican.
I'm running as a Republican in District 2.
And Jimmy Fields was a Republican?
That's correct.
Okay. And it's a majority rule body?
That's correct, from my understanding at this time.
Right, okay.
That's correct.
Fantastic. Eric, thank you so much. We very much appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for having me.
This is Locke, Meredith on Legal Lines with Eric Ponti, our state rep. Thanks for being with us today.